Welcome back to my channel. My name is Nancy Chu, your friendly PM coach. At the time of recording this video, it is December 21st, hence the Christmas background behind me. But when you watch this video, it's going to be 2025. So I hope that your holidays went well and that you had a great time with your friends and family. I wanted to make this video for you to talk about one of the most frequently asked questions that I receive of all time, which is, how do I get better at creative solutioning? Because I've gotten feedback that my solutions are not creative enough. So let's talk about that. First and foremost, notice the intent behind this question. It is assuming that creative solutioning comes at the end of product sense interview. And the reason why I'm calling this an assumption is because creative solutioning is not something that you do at the end of the interview. It is actually something that is more upstream than what most candidates think. To get to a creative solution at the end of the interview, you actually have to start thinking strategically in the beginning of the interview, primarily when you're thinking about the problem space. When you're able to think deeply and strategically about the problem space, then you could also come up with segments that are intentional for this particular problem space. And most candidates would have a gut reaction to segmentation that is based on different types of persona. I have a different perspective on how you can segment. Let's first talk about the purpose of segmentation. The reason why we need to segment is because the problem space is too vague and ambiguous. And so we have to come up with different segments and then pick the one that makes the most sense for us to continue to build a solution that has smaller scope, right? So segmentation is not limited to just different types of persona. It's basically just a way for you to scope down the problem space so that it is more manageable. And most candidates would segment the space by thinking about the different types of people that are involved in this problem space. But that's not the only way of segmentation. And I know that what I just said is super fluffy and hard to apply. So let's walk through an example together. Suppose the prompt is build something to help people enjoy art. Now, at this point, most candidates would have a gut reaction to this problem space, and they would come up with segments that are related to the different types of people. So for example, you would have the professional artists, and then you would have the people who are super interested in art, and you would have the people who are open to it, but they don't know that much about it. Most of the candidates would come up with segments that look like that. But that's not the only way of segmenting this space. And this is where I recommend that we think deeply about the prompt first before we just gloss over what art is and then start segmenting. So the prompt is help people enjoy art. What does it take for someone to enjoy art to begin with? In order to enjoy art, you have to be exposed to art first, right? And there are different types of art. And there are different ways of getting that exposure to art. One way is that you are right next to the artwork, right? You're standing right in front of it and you just love the painting so much, or you love the sculpture so much. That's why people go to museums, because they could be right there with the artwork. Right? That's one way of getting the exposure. Another way of getting exposure would be seeing the art virtually. So maybe you're looking at an image of the art, maybe you're looking at a video of the artwork, or maybe you are experiencing and interacting with this artwork in a virtual environment. Right? So that would be another way of being exposed to it. But it also depends on what type of art we're talking about when we're thinking about exposure. Art could be a painting, it could be a photograph, it could be a sculpture, or it could also be auditory. Right? Auditory art is not something that you look at. It's just something that you listen to, right? So these are the segments that I came up with after thinking more deeply about the prompt. that are different from how most people would segment the space. It's less about who the different people are, but more about what this prompt is asking for. The prompt is asking that we help people enjoy art, right? So to enjoy art, you have to be exposed to it. So let's segment by the different types of exposure. So now you're starting to see that if we were to segment by in-person art versus virtual art, or art that you see versus art that you listen to, you could start to see that the solution would start to look pretty different, right? So suppose you come up with a framework and you end up picking music as a form of art, right? And then you could then go down a path where you would build a solution that's kind of like a Spotify, right? So notice that the solution of building something that's kind of like a Spotify for this particular prompt is unique and quite different from how most people would come up with a solution. And Spotify by itself is not a creative solution per se in other prompts, but in this prompt where we're thinking about how to help people enjoy art, most of the time we don't really think about Spotify, right? So this is an example of how deep thinking and segmenting based on what the prompt is about will lead you naturally and organically toward a solution that is more creative, and that is how you can stand out in your next product sense interview. When my clients and I worked on this prompt together, they experienced a breakthrough moment because it is different from most of the education content out there on how you can segment. And I thought that it would be helpful for you to hear what they have to say after learning this way of doing segmentation. And here's the clip. You might get feedback, oh, this is not creative enough, but that's because you didn't put enough thought and you didn't pressure test your first version of the segment. So when we start to segment in a whole other way, you're going to come up with different solutions that are more creative.
Yeah, and I just want to elaborate on that one because you said, hey, I just came up with Spotify, and it could be that Spotify is not the most creative solution in other environments, but in this one, if you start with the prompt, like how to make it enjoy, I don't think you haven't ever had thought about Spotify from the beginning, and that is where it start to be a little bit different. That is what I think. Once we spend much more time on the strategy, we end up with solution that we have definitely had not thought from the beginning. Though the solution may not sound so creative at the end.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah, this was awesome. It feels to me like I just unlocked a treasure box in a game which was hidden.
We all have creative muscles. We all do. We just have to discover it and let it out. I love how my client described that this breakthrough feels like they just discovered a treasure box in a game which was hidden. So if you would like to be more creative in your next product sense interview, my invitation to you is to think more deeply about the prompt before we just gloss over it and move right on to segmentation. And really think about different ways of approaching the segments that are different from your gut reaction. Hopefully this video was helpful for you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Let me know. Thank you so much for supporting my content and my channel. It really means a lot to me that you're here. If you want more help in acing your next L6 and above PM interviews, I run monthly community roundtables, and the community also has a lot of free resources that you can leverage. I hope to see you there in our next roundtable, and I will also see you in the next video. Take care.